we had the remarkable experience of meeting Mantak Chia. Mantak Chia is a Taoist practitioner and teaches these fairly simple practices that are Taoist practices. That one of them involving something called a microcosmic orbit, and he's an advocate of the alchemy of. It starts with semen retention. It's certainly not the be-all, end-all, but it starts with semen retention, which is an incredibly odd subject in the Western world. It's not something that comes up that much, except as we've talked about sports coaches. For some reasons, there's some vestigial memory of this ancient body of a way of thinking that boxers or sports coaches will tell you don't have sex the night before a game. There's this electrostatic, electromagnetic, biochemical, bioluminescent thing, this allowance that we get every day. And the art or the science of managing these energies, managing this chemical influx, managing this certain allotment, not unlike and perhaps completely not unrelated to the metaphor of the Israelites and the manna from heaven, that you have this certain thing bestowed upon you in degrees every day, and you can expend it as fast as you are given it, as fast as the universe generates it in you, or you can accumulate it. And just like when you put on socks and you walk across a carpeted floor and you generate this electrostatic charge that you can, then release to someone else, there's this sort of electrostatic, electrochemical, and chemical buildup that happens in the body through the process of semen retention and through these through a very specific diet and through these specific types of exercises. The Taoist Neidan is the art of managing these bodily energies, refining them, and basically all the steps of alchemy: the refinement, the purification, the distillation, and then rendering it permanent. And it is, rather than the Western Christian model of abandoning sexuality and forsaking the body and living under a Bodhi tree, that's not Christian, but you know what I mean. The idea of sacrifice and abstinence and all that, rather than rejecting one part of the triangle, the Eastern model, it is the base upon which everything else happens. So I've just always been impressed since I just randomly found this Mantak Chia book. When Venice and I were flying to New York one time, and it absolutely changed my life. And then so many years later to be able to meet Mantak. So the show ends with Mantak talking about the alchemical process as it pertains to just the body. And he said this amazing thing, how even on this simple level, when an alchemist feels anger or fear, it's an energy of some sort. And as Einstein proved with E equals mc squared, all energy can be changed into other forms of energy. And so every energy can be transmuted, and everything in the universe is energy. So when Mantak says he gets angry, he recognizes that anger is an energy, and the role of the alchemist is to transmute that into something positive, into resolve, or into a work of art or something like that. So on this very basic level, every one of us is an alchemist, and every one of us is giving these raw materials all the time. And we can take those raw materials and build a castle within ourselves, or we can take them and I'm fighting the urge to use some vulgar analogy here, but as you'd said, that old saying, no one succeeds when they scatter their seeds, that there's a time and a place for using these energies and directing them towards the creation of a little person. But when you're not interested in doing that, you have this fantastic and eternally giving source of this weird psycho-spiritual energy that's capable of creating another life and infusing that meat bag with consciousness. And each of us is a generator of that fantastically weird and elusive and magical thing, whatever it is. The Chinese call it qi and jing and the three treasures. And so Mantak Chia was a really fantastic example of the actual practical application, the operative. This isn't like talking about baseball stats. This is something you actually do. And so to tie this all together, what brought us to that was through the study of the Uraeus symbolism, the connection of snakes in the third eye. When you go to Thailand, you see the same symbolism, risen snakes, you see triangles, and that same didactic templating where you put architecture over the top of body parts, and they will invariably reference the third eye. So, to kind of put a bow on this, in the process of studying ancient art, we started seeing these same motifs and these same clusters of symbols. When you start going down that rabbit hole, you get to what I feel like is the central secret of esotericism, and it's weirdly present in all the ancient cultures. You see it in Babylon, you see it in the Sumerian cultures of Egypt, of course, but also the exact same thing in the Vedantic traditions, in the Taoist traditions, in the Kundalini and Tantra traditions. And because these are so vehemently denied by Egyptology, someone has to restore these things to their proper place, because this is a birthright, an intellectual inheritance that belongs to mankind. It's like your grandmother sent you this fantastic package at Christmas and it got lost in the mail somehow and you've never did receive all the cookies and treats that you were intended to have. Or like you've just found an owner's manual for yourself that is weirdly absent in the Western world. You know, we've given this fantastically complicated machine but no instruction manual. And suddenly we look at this old art, this old didactic architecture, and we find instead of this stupid proto-religious nonsense, this is a functional, operative, interactive science that is like a magic mirror. It shows you parts of yourself that you couldn't perceive directly, but more importantly, it gives you these instructions whereby you can overcome these self-imposed obstacles, use this weird infusion or allotment or allowance of neurological and endocrinological chemicals that we're given every day as part of the living process, and literally undergo the transmutation process ourselves on all three levels as Hermes embodied.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's important. It's a really important point that the very substance of our beings and our humors and our temperament itself, and also the world that we sense around us, and how that infiltrates in our psyche and our imagination. These are this is the prima materia of the inner alchemy, and it mediates the body and the psyche, and because that's, we experience the world through those organs. We experience it through the sensory organs, but also the third eye or the imaginal organ, and either way, we're given this raw experience, which composes us, and that's really the substance we have to engage and transform into our primordial nature.